Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Hosts Jean and Tim, along with team members
Teresa, Linda, and Annie,
are master gardener volunteers for New York's Columbia and Greene counties. So if you're interested in gardening or nature, or nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, settle in. Enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we have something to say.
Hi, I'm Jean Thomas. Welcome to Episode 3 of Patch to Plate, where Annie Scibienski, team member supreme and cook par excellence, follows the seasons in the garden. This episode covers high summer. We're talking about recipes for corn and tomatoes and melons and the brassicas. My name's Annie Scibienski. I'm a master gardener, volunteer, and a member of the Nature Calls podcast team. On today's episode of Patch to Plate, I'm going to talk about corn. I think of grilled corn on the cob with a light touch of butter and sprinkled with salt as one of the iconic tastes of summer. Even if you don't grow your own, our farm stands and stores offer such an abundant opportunity to source fresh corn. You should really take advantage of it. The first corn accompaniments that come to my mind were butter and salt. Let me mention a few others that pair great with corn. Basil, peppers, both chili peppers and bell peppers. Mushrooms are great with corn. Onions, garlic, olive oil, stalks too. Citruses go well with corn, particularly lemon and lime. And cream. Creamed corn. You love that. Beyond those big voices that sing so sweetly with the flavors of corn are bacon, cayenne, celery, cheddar, chives, cilantro, crab, shrimp, dill, potatoes, thyme, tomatoes. Besides the lemon and lime that I mentioned, corn pairs well with the acidic notes of vinegars, vinaigrettes, and dry white wine. I'm not sure what's in your pantry or refrigerator, but I typically have a lot of these ingredients on hand. To enjoy the rich, caramelized, sugary, and smoky flavors of grilled corn and the benefits of cooking over an open fire, you have to remove or pull back the husks from the corn. If you grill your corn with the husks covering the kernels, in effect, you're steaming the corn. That's okay if you want steamed corn, but to get the benefits of grilling, the kernels should be uncovered. Either way you go, you want to pull back the husks and remove the silk before you cook it. If you want to leave yourself a built-in handle, you can leave the husks on, pull them back, tie them together with a piece of butcher's twine or use a twisty tie, brush the corn with little olive oil or melted butter, and put the corn on the grill over high heat. To prevent the husks from burning, you can place a shield of foil between the grill and the corn husks. You can char your corn and develop some of that caramel sweetness by cooking it in a piping hot cast iron pan too. Don't use any oil in the pan, just get it hot, put the corn in the pan, either the shucked cobs or kernels. Just let them sit and brown a bit. If you have cobs in the pan, you can turn them with tongs. For kernels, just stir them around with a wooden spoon. I think we tend to think of corn strictly as an American treasure, and it is native to the Americas. Archaeologists even found popcorn in Utah and Peru that they can date back over 1,000 years, far longer than it's been in the sofa cushions at your house. In fact, corn's a popular food worldwide. Last year, the National Agricultural Library hosted a 3-part webinar series that highlighted global food staples and the intersections of global cuisines with our USDA research, social science, and history. The program focused on maize and corn in its past, present, and future role in food, culture, and society. Fortunately, the series was recorded, and a link is in the show notes so you can watch the series if you missed it. Anyway, 3 very accomplished chefs are featured in the series, and I've included a link to their recipes too. They offer up the ingredients and methods for preparing several dishes, including popcorn crusted salmon, sweet corn puree, and fire-roasted corn salad, and there's other recipes you'll find there too. The fire-roasted corn salad would be a great staple on the dinner table every evening that fresh ingredients are in season. Here's how to put it together. Grill a couple of ears of corn until charred. When cool enough to handle, cut the kernels off. Dice a plum tomato and half of a medium red onion. Mince up some cilantro, put the corn in a bowl, mix in the other ingredients, and squeeze the juice of a ripe lime over the mix. Season it with a good bit of salt to taste. You can put that out on the table right then, or you can prep ahead of time, cover it, refrigerate it, give the flavors a chance to melt. Either way, it's going to be enjoyable. You'll see from the link for this recipe that it calls for a Roma tomato, and that's a good choice. But use any plum tomato that you have on hand. We typically have both San Marzano and Amish paste in the garden. The plums have a dense flesh with less moisture and tend to have fewer seeds than other tomatoes. Oops, I went down the garden path by the tomatoes. Back to corn. Wildly popular at present are several variations of Mexican corn. On the cob, it's called elote. Off the cob and in a bowl, it's called esquites. For the elote, the corn is grilled and then coated with a mixture of crema, rolled in a crumbled cotija cheese, sprinkled with chili powder, and drizzled with a squeeze of lime, then rolled in chopped cilantro. You can find the cojita in larger markets, but if you can't find the crema, consider substituting a 50-50 mix of mayo and sour cream. Or you could even lighten the recipe further by substituting Greek yogurt. Not to get too far from the original recipe, but if I have feta on hand, I'm more likely to substitute that for the cojita than to make a trip to the market. I've included an esquites recipe for serving this delicious mix in a bowl. This works best when finger food isn't part of your dining plan. You know, vegetables are best when they're as fresh as possible, and it's especially true with corn. It has a high sugar content, and as it ages, the sugars in the kernels turn to starch. This mutes the flavor, and it affects the texture when it's cooked. Corn is enjoyed across the world in some form every season. Today we focused on fresh corn, but there are scads of resources on how to use it throughout the year, dried, frozen, popped, or fermented. And if you want to grow your own next season, the Cornell Vegetable Guide to Vegetables for New York Growers lists early corn, mid-season corn, late corn, popcorn. It lists white corn, yellow corn, bicolor corn. Not to be too corny, but check out the guide. There's a lot of growing advice there about corn. I've added a link to the Utah Extension that provides information about preserving corn, which includes freezing, canning, and pickling guidance. For other recipes, you can go to our Cornell website. The Master Gardener Volunteers Cookbook contains recipes for garden salsa as well as corn chowder, both helping to bring the garden or fresh farm taste of corn to the table. You can call the office if you'd like to buy a copy. Enjoy. That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. My name's Annie Scibienski. I'm a master gardener, volunteer, and a member of the Nature Calls podcast team. In today's episode of Patch to Plate, I'm going to talk about melons. I want to talk about a great tool that Cornell's made freely available to New York gardeners. It's a website that allows us to rate and review vegetable varieties that we've grown. I think of it as Yelp for vegetables. It's called Vegetable Varieties for New York Gardeners, and it's a citizen science program. It allows you to search fruits and vegetables by keyword. In this case, I searched for melons, and then was able to check out the varieties that have scored well with other New York gardeners. To be listed, a variety has to have a minimum rating of 3.5 on a scale of 5. You can limit your search to varieties that have scored, say, 4 or 5 only. It's a cool tool, and in addition to reading others' reviews and ratings, you can leave yours for varieties that you've grown. I put a link in our show notes. Registration takes just a few minutes. When I took a look, the top-rated watermelon variety was the AU Sweet Scarlet Melon. This variety yields a big, round, heavy fruit, like 20-pound watermelon. It's got a dark red fruit and a striped green rind. It is probably picture perfect for a picnic. Let's walk through a watermelon salad. Get out a big bowl, big enough to handle 1.5 cups of fruit per person that you plan to serve. You should also figure on 1 cup of cubed seeded chilled watermelon per person, a handful of chopped arugula, a couple of tablespoons of crumbled feta, and maybe a tablespoon of finely minced red onion per serving. Mix those ingredients all together in your bowl. Now whisk up a quick dressing. Even parts balsamic vinegar and extra virgin olive oil. Use roughly 1.5 teaspoons of each per person. Combine that with some salt and pepper and pour the dressing over the salad, toss and serve. With these proportions in mind, it's easy to scale up the recipe for a large crowd. And even half a portion would be a nice starter for a summer supper. If you're removing the rind, you can make watermelon pickle and enjoy that even in the off-season, evoking the memories of summer. I've put a link to a safe canning recipe in the show notes. If you're interested in canning and preserving, give a listen to episode 6, where CCE's own Becky Palmatier provides an introduction. The Cornell veggie site that I mentioned has a wealth of cantaloupe varieties to choose from. I saw 7 varieties with 5 out of 5 stars and another dozen or so with 4-star ratings, all grown successfully by New York gardeners. Most are hybrids, but there are a few heirloom varieties too, with names like Sweet and Early, Goddess, and Sugar Queen. The temptation to add melons to the garden is very real. I need no temptation, however, to eat cantaloupe. It's my favorite among summer's sweet treats. Some folks like their melons sprinkled with a little sugar, others with a dash of salt. Of course, as with watermelon, a squeeze of lemon or lime can perk up the flavor of a melon that seems a bit bland. A ripe slice of chilled cantaloupe would be welcome on my plate, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Beyond chilled, treating melons like cantaloupe or honeydew with heat intensifies the flavor, turning juice to syrup and the natural sugars into caramel. You can give your melon the heat treatment on the grill, under the broiler, or stovetop in a pan. It can also save an underripened fruit from disappointing you by concentrating the flavors. Here's an example. Peel and seed a honeydew or cantaloupe, cut it into 1-inch slices. Place these on a sheet pan about 4 inches under the broiler until they just start to color. Start checking at 4 minutes. If the barbecue grill is hot, use that instead. Flip them over and broil them for another 2 minutes or so. Sprinkle the pan with a few tablespoons of chopped pine nuts and give it half a minute under the broiler until they just begin to toast. Serve the melon and the pine nuts warm, drizzled with balsamic vinegar and a couple of grinds of black pepper. This taste treat was inspired by a Mark Bittman recipe that I read several years ago, and we're still enjoying it. The recipes that I've talked about today keep melon preparation simple and celebrate these delicious seasonal fruits. I've got one more in the show notes. The crazy preparation involves shallots and anchovies, and I wait every year to get a ripe enough melon to really enjoy it. Go to our website for a link. And for other recipes, please go to the Cornell Nutrition page on our website. Enjoy. That's it for this episode of Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. Hi, I'm Annie Scibienski. I'm a Master Gardener volunteer and a member of the Nature Calls podcast team. In today's Patch to Plate episode, I'm going to talk about eating peppers and tomatoes. If you haven't heard Teresa Golden's talk about growing tomatoes, you can get up to speed with a link in our show notes to that segment. You'll also probably want to listen to Jean's and Tim's wonderful interview with Miriam Rubin. She's the author of a book titled Tomatoes. Peppers and tomatoes, onions, garlic, parsley too. Everything in the garden is ready. The farm stands are brimming. Even if we don't need much, every week we tour the farms. We visit our local farm stands, our favorites, and we see what's fresh and available, sometimes what's new or different. We pick up those items that we don't grow ourselves but recognize as seasonal, fresh, and we want to incorporate into this week's meals. We typically have bell peppers, serranos, jalapenos, fresnos, maybe shishitos, and Thai hots growing too in our garden. For us, more peppers, more better. Both peppers and tomatoes pair well together, and they share an affinity for cheese, particularly goat cheese, gorgonzola, and Parmesan. Both peppers and tomatoes love garlic, olive oil, onions, thyme, and the acid of vinegar. Keep those common compatibilities in mind when you're putting together your recipe or choosing among recipes. If another veggie, a particular herb, a dash of vinegar, or a sprinkle of a certain cheese will bring out the best attributes of more than one key ingredient, you're really increasing your chances of creating a tasty dish. Let's talk about a simple dish, fast food, dinner in under 30 minutes. Start by placing the oven rack about 6 inches below the broiler and preheat the oven to a hot 425 degrees Fahrenheit. Gather your ingredients. You'll need 1 sausage link per person, about 3 or 4 ounces of cherry or grape tomatoes, a half an onion, and the equivalent of 1 bell pepper. You may want to mix up the peppers. We like red, yellow, and orange all together in this dish. And those proportions are just the suggestion based on the way that we prepare this meal. You're the one who knows your audience, and so add a little more of that, omit something else, or pull back on the amount so that it really fits in the way your folks like to eat. What you're going to do is grab a sheet pan and put 3 or 4 ounces of the cherry tomatoes per person on that. Wedge up an onion into 4 or 6 wedges, depending on how big it is. Cut your pepper into strips 2 inches wide. Slice up some garlic and grab the dried thyme. What you want to do is either spray or toss the veggies with olive oil, sprinkle everything with thyme, and give it all a good squeeze of lemon. Sprinkle it sparingly with salt. Now, if you're using a raw sausage like Italian sweet or spicy sausage, you'll want to score the links of sausage or cut them into long diagonal coins and put them on the sheet pan with the veggies and get some olive oil on that as well. If you're using pre-cooked sausage like a chicken and spinach sausage or vegetarian or vegan sausage, you can slice them up, but hold off putting them in the oven yet. You don't want them to dry out. So now you put your sheet pan in the oven, either with or without the sausage, and set the timer for about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you'll want to pull it out, toss the veggies, toss the sausage if it's in there. If not, add the sausage at this point and add the garlic too. Pop it back in the oven for another 10 minutes or so. The sausage should be cooked or warmed through and the garlic just beginning to color. The tomatoes will have collapsed. If you'd like a little bit more browning on the meal, change the oven setting to broil and give it a final 3, 4, 5 minutes. Now pull it out, sprinkle with freshly grated Parmesan or Gorgonzola, and either give it another squeeze of lemon or offer lemon wedges with it when you serve it. For serving suggestions, you can have this over rice, tossed with pasta, or on a piece of toasted sourdough. Summer. If you don't want to heat your oven, you can do this same preparation in a large skillet. When we cook it on the stovetop, we call it hearty root sauce in honor of all the goodies we've received in our CSA share from our CSA Hearty Roots. Don't want sausage tonight? Set the oven at 405 degrees Fahrenheit. Peel and clean some shrimp. Add them to the veggies. Spray and bake for 15 minutes, approximately, until the shrimp are curled and pink. This meal is great on toast, and you can toast your bread at the same time you're cooking the shrimp and veggies in the hot oven. If you prefer a vegan option tonight for dinner, cooked white beans, cannellini beans, would be my choice. Again, 15 minutes at the higher temp would be good. Now I want to offer an outstanding pepper standalone. This takes a bit of time, but the dish is largely unattended for most of it. For 2, I like a red bell pepper for its sweetness in this dish. Preheat the oven to 350 Fahrenheit, cut a pepper in half from stem to base, scrape out the ribs and seeds. A teaspoon's a handy tool for that. Sliver a clove of garlic. Put the peppers, cut side up, in an oiled roasting pan. Divide the slivers of garlic into the peppers, season with salt and pepper, and spray with olive oil or dribble olive oil lightly onto the garlic. Roast that for 40 minutes. 10 minutes before the 40's up, heat a frying pan, spray with oil, and pan-sear some scallops, or sauté some shelled and cleaned shrimp. Remove the peppers from the oven, dollop with pesto, and top with the seafood. White beans, like giant lima beans, would be a great vegetarian substitute for that meal. For a standalone tomato, preheat the broiler with the rack 6 inches from the heat source. Cut a ripe but still firm tomato in half across the equator. Rub it or spray it with olive oil, sprinkle with Parmesan or some other melty cheese of choice, dust with herbs, and broil it. It'll be a quick 3 to 5 minutes until the cheese is melted and browning. Drizzle with balsamic vinegar. This is a favorite summer side in our house. I haven't included any recipes for the dishes I've described. They're simple preparations with lots of flexibility. In the show notes, I did include a recipe for another favorite, Tunisian tomato and pepper stew. Our Master Gardener's Cookbook has a garden salsa recipe highlighting peppers and tomatoes, and that can be served as an appetizer with chips or as an accompaniment for chicken or fish. Call the office if you'd like a copy of the cookbook. For other recipes, please go to the nutrition page on our Cornell website. Enjoy. That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. Hi, my name is Annie Scibienski, and I'm a Master Gardener, volunteer, and a member of the Nature Calls podcast team. On today's episode, Patch to Plate, I'm going to talk about cabbage, cauliflower, and broccoli. Some of the popular members of the brassica family. Other family members include bok choy, collards, Brussels sprouts, kale, kohlrabi, rutabaga, and turnips. If you're interested in growing any of these in your home or community garden, I've included a link to vegetable varieties for New York gardeners. Please check it out. There are 25 varieties with a 5 of 5 rating and many, many others that rate extremely well. Cabbage can be grown throughout the season, and it stores well, making it a convenient, thrifty, and nutritious ingredient to have on hand. If you've been listening to the show, you've heard me talk about roasting cabbage, a tried and true preparation. I'll include that recipe in the show notes. Today, though, I want to talk about a stovetop preparation that to me screams comfort food, cabbage and noodles. The preparation for this is simple, and I'll include a copy in the show notes, but here's the overview. Dice a large onion, and in a large Dutch oven, saute it with half a stick of butter or margarine. Shred about 2 pounds of cabbage, roughly half a head. When the onions translucent, add the cabbage to the pan and cook over low heat, stirring occasionally until the cabbage is just soft. A little browning is fine. You just want to make sure the cabbage doesn't stick to the pan. It'll probably take about 12 to 15 minutes. Season the cabbage and onions with salt and pepper. While the cabbage is sautéing, cook the noodles. I like to use a wide egg noodle or a wide tagliatelle noodle with this cabbage and noodles dish. After you cook the noodles, drain them, reserving half a cup of water, and put the noodles back in the pan. Add the cooked cabbage and onions to the noodles and stir it all together to mix it. Depending on your tradition, you might mix in a tablespoon of toasted poppy seeds or toasted caraway seeds. Both are very popular and rooted in Eastern European food traditions. Use the reserved noodle water to loosen the dish as needed. Serve it in a bowl. For a bit of additional decadence, top each portion with a tablespoon of sour cream. Another baked cabbage comfort recipe is a savory cabbage-filled phyllo pie. This one's yummy too. I've put a link in the show notes if you'd like to have a look. If comfort is the theme of the episode, then let's turn to cauliflower mac and cheese that uses pureed squash rather than a rich bechamel. Here's an overview. Roasted onion and an acorn squash. The temps, prep, and times are all in the recipe. You can even do this roasting a day ahead. Bring a large pot of salted water to boil over high heat. Add the pasta and cauliflower, return it to a boil, and cook it for half the time suggested on the pasta package. While that's cooking, put the roasted squash along with broth, cheddar, feta, yogurt, paprika, and of course some salt and pepper into a blender and process that until smooth. Drain the pasta, stir in the squash sauce and onion, spread the mixture in a prepared baking pan, and bake until the top is golden. This will probably be about 25 minutes at 350. Reconnecting with this recipe to share with you today resulted in cauliflower on my shopping list and cauliflower mac and cheese on this week's menu. I'll make it with some pureed butternut that I already have in the freezer. I'll probably also chop some walnuts and sprinkle them on top during the last few minutes of roasting. The final veg that I want to talk about today is broccoli, and the recipe that I want to highlight is fast food at our house, broccoli and cavatelli. I'll include a link in the show notes, and if you're new to the idea, follow along for the first few times until you make it your own. Then write it down and pass it on to those that you want to feed and nourish. In a saucepan, heat some olive oil over moderate heat. Add garlic and cook it, stirring until it just starts to get golden. Add the broccoli florets, salt, red pepper flakes, and let it cook. Keep stirring for a couple of minutes. Then add the broth of your choice and let it all simmer together for about 5 minutes. Meanwhile, cook the pasta. Drain it and transfer it to the saucepan. Toss with the sauce to combine and serve this with cheese. The basic recipe is also the perfect base for a protein of your choice. Sauté a few shrimp, reheat and shred a leftover chicken thigh, add a 1/4 cup of cooked rinsed beans, any style, or use the broccoli cavatelli as the base for a big common table meal. By that I mean cook up a big meal that all your people have in common. For instance, you could make this with gluten-free pasta. We like brown rice pasta. Then serve it in a big bowl and let everyone take a portion and top it with their choice of diced chicken, baked tofu, cubed leftover steak, or fish or beans. This is a crowd pleaser. Get comfortable cooking broccoli. Whether you steam it or roast it or boil it, pick up a head when it's on sale and cook it up when you're in the kitchen doing other things. You could enjoy it all week. So far, this week, we've made the broccoli and cavatelli with shrimp for dinner. At breakfast, some leftover broccoli went into my omelet with mushrooms and Swiss. At lunch today, I polished it off with leftover brown rice, tofu, and scrambled egg in a very satisfying lunch bowl. Having fresh local veggies on hand makes it easy to incorporate them into your meals. Enjoy yours with me. For other recipes, please go to the nutrition page on our Cornell website. That's it for this edition of From Patch to Plate. I'm Annie Scibienski. Thanks for listening.
That concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank Sandra Powers and Devin Connolly from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties for production support. And a special thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenmgb@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Counties Facebook page. For more information about Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties, visit our website at ccecolumbiagreen.org or visit us in Hudson or in Acra. Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal programming and employment opportunities